most powerful impact was in this school I worked in Hawaii. So I used to live in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I worked at this school called SEEKS, the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability. And it was a middle school and a charter school, which in the US, therefore, is a free school. It is private, but it is free. The admission is lottery based. So it had an extremely diverse student population. You had homeless kids studying next to kids of university professors, like a really diverse student population. And this school had organized the entire, so this is a middle school, so ages like 11 to 14. And this school had organized the entire curriculum based on 5 sustainability skills. And these skills were thinking systemically, reasoning analytically, uh, communicating effectively. Then there was a collaboration skill, and then one was sort of a time management, project management skill. And every single thing was taught through the lens of these skills. But what was even more amazing was the entire afternoon was devoted to this uh, essential question of sustainability. So at the start of every term, we used to take the kids on these learning. So there would be a theme for the semester. And then we take these kids on these learning trips around the island because we were on the island of Oahu. And if the theme was, say, freshwater, we'd just take them to sites and places and communities that were doing interesting things around freshwater just to spark their imagination because they're children as well. They're not been exposed to that much yet. And then they would come up with these projects, these semester long projects. And sometimes they'd work in groups and sometimes they'd work individually. All kids these days, I mean, all young people are extremely anxious about the environment. They are anxious. I mean, by the time they're in high school, they're often um, extremely anxious, especially about climate change, because it's their whole future that, they're looking ahead at. And providing a way to feel empowered through education, like teaching them early that, hey, you can engage and have an impact is extremely empowering. So not only does it allow them to feel useful and empowered and kind of a useful member, contributing member of community, which if you think of most of education, we don't do that. We kind of like separate them from society and put them in these classrooms. And especially by the middle school age, I feel it's a real problem that we do this because kids are now arriving at an age where they just want to feel more like useful members of society. Um, so that is just extremely empowering. The second part of it is it like really orients them towards work in this field. So they start to get a tangible sense of what it means to do this work like early. And the third thing is it makes them excited about education. You are in such an anxious state, like when you are so emotionally shut down, like you cannot access like higher brain function, like you're just surviving. So it's important to qualify that like, you know, anxiety, like there's a range of anxiety, and there's certain states in which you cannot access education or benefit from it. Over time, you are able, like once you are past that state, you can recover. And all learning is simultaneously emotional and intellectual. Okay, always. All education, all learning is, simultaneously you're experiencing it at both these levels. And the more conscious we are as teachers, as educators, that this is the reality, the more we can design better for this. So, say when you are talking about climate change or talking about peace or talking about human rights, these are like heavy topics. Okay, these are heavy topics, and if you are not really paying attention to the emotional experience of your students alongside whatever intellectual stuff they're learning, you're going to probably just lose them because the moment you get into these very heavy topics, like the natural inclination is to start to disassociate if it's so hard and so heavy. Uh, I feel like mainstream education has barely evolved in some ways in many hundreds of years. Like, so mainstream education really, I think, was preparing people to be factory workers, you know, the late 1800s. And we're still in that mode, like, of warehousing children, cutting them off from society. Um, and if most children are disengaged from education, that's not the children's fault, it's the system's fault. The system is failing them. We have designed this system wrong. At a certain age, the more you allow kids to feel like they are contributing members of society, and that education is empowering them to be contributing members of society, the better the experience is. And the other thing I've really seen is that teachers who really intuitively understand that learning is an emotional experience alongside an intellectual experience, and they're really just like leaning in with so much care and so much love, like, they're just like turning up every day with just so much care for the children, irrespective of where they are, like in terms of their studies and how good they are at their studies. Uh, that I think is just also like a really a big differentiator. We're talking about something like climate change. It's such a complex field, you know, and none of us is like none of us have all the answers, right? Um, and I saw what was happening at this school, what was so cool. So all these teachers in this school, SEEKS, the School for Examining Essential Questions of Sustainability, none of them were environmental experts. They had all gone through traditional, like, they were trained as English teachers or science teachers or whatever is the traditional teaching, like education they've received, because they all had teaching licenses, and they saw themselves as co-learners and guides mode of education where the teacher is not caught up in their expertise. The teacher becomes a guide and a support, and of course the teacher knows more than the kids in a way, and that's obviously helpful. Like, you still need to know some stuff, or at least you need to be able to know where to find the right information. Knowledge still matters, information matters, science matters, especially with climate change. But you don't have to know it all. And especially with complex topics, human rights, climate change, like, you're not going to know it all. You're not going to have all the answers. But you are working alongside the children uh, to try to figure this out together, you know, and you're really allowing people to follow their own curiosity, and you're kind of supporting it as they go. You connect learning to purpose. If you allow people to follow their nose, if you change the role of the teacher from expert to guide, like, all of these are new ways of, you know, um, thinking about education, which is very different from the traditional model where you come, you deliver content, you think everything you've delivered is somehow going to stay in that person's mind, and the same thing applies to everybody, and everybody has to pass the same tests, and yeah, that's like a really outdated model and is not serving us well at all. Two things I've seen that work quite interesting about mainstream education and ways to shift it. So because people, like, suppose you're just a teacher and you don't feel like you have power over the whole system. Like, how can you influence this system? And I've seen teachers get very creative in their classroom. So it doesn't mean that they don't meet whatever teaching requirements they have. Just shifted the emphasis of some of the creative things are possible even in the traditional system. The other thing I've noticed, and I was at this other school, very traditional private school. What I noticed was how much was happening outside of school hours. So there was a sustainability club, and those kids were like really on it. Like, they were organizing campaigns. What I also noticed was very interesting is that, like, uh, when especially for young people, like, the entry point is just like where you have influence. So, for example, the sustainability club, where they feel they have influence is usually the school itself. So they start doing the work on the school, in the school, and they come up with projects that are related to the school. Uh, but that is just the starting point. So at that other school, SEEKS, like, there was a project where kids were trying to. So the thing in Hawaii is that we used to have plastic pollution on the beaches. So plastic was a really big issue. Um, so everyone was very aware of plastic, and there was a lot of effort to try to get plastics, like, less use of plastics. Um, and it makes sense that, like, kids notice that first because you're on the beach and you just see the plastic pollution. And the uh, so these kids, they had their own project, which was to try to get restaurants to not use plastic straws. And so they did some project around that, but then they got like really motivated. And then the next semester they were like, we're going to go to the state capitol and start campaigning. And this was a school that would enable this. Like the teachers would take them in a little school bus and they would start to go out to the capitol to meet representatives. And they were so young, you know. And so like from that first project, which was just their school project, then they were already starting to step out, and have influence. Uh, and all of this is like very valuable education if you think about it. Like all these are very useful skills for life. So we draw on various design. I mean, we have a philosophy of education, okay, and that means drawing on best practices uh, and attending to various streams of design principles, we call them. So for example, one is like, what is best practices in sustainability education? So what do we know works really well in sustainability education? And I look a lot at this school and this idea of sustainability skills, and what are these sustainability skills, and how do we so for one very important skill is actually this idea of thinking systemically, so thinking in systems, being able to think across kind of the ecological system, the science, like the physical world system and the human world system. Like, and especially for adults, this is very important because like often people in charge of businesses, etc., they've been through MBA programs and they've been taught a model of the economy as if there is no environment. Okay, like they literally do not have a mental model. They do not have a way of thinking of the economy as embedded in the natural world. I mean, and this is actually the core of our problem, that we are operating as if operating business as if there is no natural world that we're, so there's this thinking in systems. It's a very important skill. So the first thing is best practices of sustainable education. Then we look at best practices in online education, because our program is online and there's a whole bunch of things that come from that are possible and also like limited by being online. Like if you get on a Zoom and all you do is deliver a PowerPoint presentation, um, like you're going to lose a lot of the students. And another key thing for us is also just like generally like emotional and intellectual safety. That's really important. Like we have learners from all over the world. In some places, it's dangerous, politically dangerous to be working on climate change. So everything from like, you know, protecting people's privacy to um, also just understanding that like people are experiencing this very differently in different parts of climate change, very differently in different parts of the world. And like hard stuff can therefore come up in classroom context. Connected to this is being truly global. If you are like, this is what we are, like we get like more than 25, 30 countries in every cohort. So we have to think, what does it mean to really be truly global? And I think we are actually not fully there, like in the sense that we still rely, most of the information on climate change and the sources and resources are from the global north. Um, they're produced mainly because I think there's just more money for this research here. There's more, and fair enough, also there's more responsibility in the global north, right, for this problem. And so, but that also means like you have to do extra work to really contextualize this make sense for people in different places, find speakers from different contexts, find experts from all over the world, make sure the assignments speak to people's contexts, make sure you are paying attention to your sources, all of that sort of global kind of really being, because this is a global problem. Yes, it would be great for nonprofits, I think, to advocate for this, and to make justice part of it as well. For my own theory of change is we just need to empower as many people as possible to work on this problem from wherever they are, from whatever context they can have influence, like everywhere. And to me, therefore, education is a big part of this.